Russia invaded Ukraine on 24th February 2022. Since then, the conflict has been snowballing out of control. So much so that it has triggered Europe's largest refugee crisis since the Second World War. The West imposed heavy economic sanctions on Russia, intending to cripple the Russian economy. They wanted to make the costs of the Russian invasion of Ukraine so high that it becomes impossible for Mr. Putin to continue the war. But that doesn't seem happening at the moment. On the contrary, Europe is staring at an energy crisis. The oil prices have skyrocketed. Because of this, Russia is generating more revenue from energy exports than it did before the war began. The Western plan to choke oil from Russia seems to have backfired as of now. Let us try to understand the oil politics going on in the region. At the outset, we will talk about the genesis of the present energy crisis. The International Energy Agency was created as a result of the oil crisis of the 1970s. Its mission is global energy security and transition towards secure and sustainable energy. As per the International Energy Agency, Russia is the world's third largest oil producer behind the US and Saudi Arabia. For transporting oil and gas, Russia has a huge network of pipelines, most of which were built in the Soviet era. What is the need for exporting through pipelines when we have railways, roadways, and oil tankers? Because pipelines are the cheapest way of transportation. Now, Russia is the European Union's biggest energy partner. Europe relies on Russia for more than 40% of its gas and 25% of its petroleum. Germany gets 35% of its gas imports from Russia. The Nord Stream pipelines comprise two Nord Stream 1 pipelines and two Nord Stream 2 pipelines. Both of these sets of pipelines run under the Baltic Sea from Russia to Germany. From here, the fuel goes further to the rest of Europe. Following Russia's recognition of the Donetsk and Luhansk republics, Germany suspended the certification of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This natural gas pipeline would have expanded the Nord Stream line and would have doubled the annual capacity. So, as of now, Nord Stream 1 is the main pipeline that feeds Germany. Now, in a recent development, Russia has cut natural gas supplies to Germany by 60% via the Nord Stream 1 gas pipeline. As per the Russian state-owned energy corporation Gazprom, this is because of a technical issue. Because of the Western sanctions, a key piece of equipment was held up in Canada, where it had been taken for maintenance. European countries are not buying this argument. They call it a political move that has been taken because of Europe's political and military support for Ukraine. According to them, Russia is weaponizing energy exports, and it is nothing but an arm-twisting measure to gain territorial concessions from Ukraine. Let us move ahead and talk about the nature of the crisis. The main reason for the supply bottlenecks felt all across Europe is that all through these years, energy sources were not diversified. Instead, the energy routes were diversified. Hence, the dependence on Russia remained. Now, due to the steep supply cuts, the Nord Stream pipeline is running at nearly 40% capacity. Lesser supply results in higher prices. High energy prices lead to higher manufacturing as well as transportation costs. The result is high inflation. The soaring fuel prices are causing severe economic pressure and making it uneconomical for energy-intensive industries to operate. Countries are forced to declare a state of alert on energy and devise plans for gas rationing. Governments are planning to incentivize industries and utilities to reduce natural gas usage and conserve as much energy as possible. Governments will have to ask citizens to reduce consumption. If the war does not escalate further, consumers might not see major cuts in the energy supplies as industries would be limited first. Rationing gas supplies to the industries is necessary to ensure that homes, hospitals, and schools do not face an energy crunch. However, high inflation will hit their pockets. The energy demand peaks in winters when fuel is required for heating. So, European countries fill up their reserves over summer when they can buy the gas cheaper. This is how they prepare for winter. However, major supply cuts are hindering the filling up of the gas storage before the winter. As of now, Europe's summer heat wave is driving up natural gas demand for cooling systems. The upcoming winter will drive up the demand further for heating systems. With the fuel price hike, the operating costs of industries will shoot up. They will pass it on to the consumers. Hence, citizens will eventually feel the pinch of high fuel costs. It will present a challenge before the governments to provide energy payments to households for the short term. Further, higher inflation rates coupled with the economic slowdown will lead to stagflation. There will be an increase in unemployment. Hungary has been opposing European Union sanctions on Russian oil and gas, warning that the Russian gas ban could be disastrous for the European Union's economy. But Hungary is a member of NATO and the European Union. Why is it doing so? Because Hungary has been assured of continued and uninterrupted Russian gas shipments via Serbia and Austria. We know that there are no permanent enemies and no permanent friends, only permanent interests. It appears to be Mr. Putin's plan to divide the European Union. If it succeeds, it might lead to fractures in the alliance. Economics rule like always. If Russia completely cuts the supply, it will be a totally different ballgame. What about the alternative gas suppliers? Because of the ban or boycott of cheaper Russian gas delivered by the pipeline, European countries are forced to purchase expensive liquefied natural gas from the US delivered by ship. To make things worse, an explosion at the liquefied natural gas facility in the Texas Gulf Coast has squeezed the supplies to Europe. Norway and Algeria are Europe's biggest gas suppliers after Russia. UK and Azerbaijan too might step in to reduce the shortfall. In a desperate measure, the European Union is aiming strengthened energy cooperation with Israel as well. Apart from the Israeli natural gas, other natural gas alternatives are Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the US. But note that these are just alternatives and not a substitute. They cannot replace the Russian supply. Moreover, the required energy infrastructure is not there. For instance, Germany has no LNG import terminals yet, and it is planning to bring in floating terminals. What about the OPEC nations? They work for the stabilization of oil markets. Can they substitute for the oil supply loss caused due to sanctions and the boycott of Russian oil? No. The OPEC countries have cleared that the crisis in global oil markets has compounded to a level that is beyond their capacity to resolve. However, sanctions on Russia might transform India's role in the global oil trade. There are chances of it becoming a refining hub for Europe. Russian crude oil refined into diesel and petrol in India might be exported to Europe. So, the West might be buying the oil that originated in Russia, and that too at a higher rate. Double whammy. Replacing Russian gas entirely in the short term is impossible. European Union has not banned Russian gas totally because it was impractical. And the European nations are racing to fill up their storage. Russian oil supply to China and India has grown substantially. Russia is exporting oil to India and China at discounted prices. Russia has overtaken Saudi Arabia as the largest oil supplier to China. This has helped Russia to maintain oil production levels and generate huge revenue due to increased oil prices. The Kremlin is managing the public sentiment through a sharp reduction in making the budget data public. Less data? People won't know how much is being spent on war. The energy sector is the biggest greenhouse gas emitter. Being one of the top greenhouse gas emitters of all time, Europe has been working on green energy sources for years now. So, why can't Europe fulfill the shortfall through renewables? Because despite all the efforts, the share of renewables is still less than 20% of the total energy supply. What about nuclear energy? The required infrastructure is not in place. Dependency in any relationship is an invitation to control and exploitation. The dependency on Russian fossil fuels poses energy security risks for Europe. Hence, the need arises for an oil diversification strategy. In line with this, the European Commission and International Energy Agency are jointly planning to reduce dependence on Russian energy. They are aiming to reduce Russian gas imports by 2/3 within a year and completely by 2030. So, in a way, the European Union could use the crisis to move forward in the long run. But for now, as a temporary measure, they are forced to backslide on heavily polluting coal. Forget about ramping up the use of renewable energy. Countries may turn back to dirty fossil fuels. There are plans to operate coal-powered stations to produce electricity and save the natural gas that would otherwise be burnt. Also, the limits on coal-generated energy production are being removed. Coal is the most carbon-intensive fossil fuel. most European countries wanted to phase out coal-fired plants by 2030. But now they are forced to go against their commitment to cut back on the use of coal. Gas-fired power plants are being converted to run on coal in case of emergencies. But why? Because of the sheer necessity to cut gas use now and save it for winter. Countries are planning to reopen coal power stations. Importing coal from developing nations is also on the table. These emergency measures are clearly at odds with the climate targets of some European Union countries. As usual, with the sidelining of climate goals, the economy is overpowering ecology. But can Russia do everything on its own? No. Russia too needs Western components for its oil and gas infrastructure. It needs Western technology and machinery for both civilian as well as military use. For example, Russia needs chips, semiconductors, and critical raw materials like lithium to continue manufacturing weapon systems and electronic equipment. Moreover, wars are ridiculously expensive. In order to save its economy, Russia will look for willing partners for exporting its oil, coal, minerals, and grains. Also, it will try to find out new trade routes for importing the sanctioned goods. Mr. Putin will try to exploit the potential weak links in the sanctions network to help Russia evade sanctions. After all, not every country would stay away from the lucrative sanctions avoidance business. Russia would also turn towards the Eurasian Economic Union. The Eurasian Economic Union came into force in 2015. Its members are Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia. This integrated single market of post-Soviet states encourages the free movement of goods and services. Can Mr. Putin circumvent the sanctions imposed by the US and Europe? Sanctions have been imposed on Russian oil. That means Russian vessels can't dock in any European Union port. So, Russian vessels will take oil to international waters and turn off the location trackers. From there, it will be loaded into a second tanker belonging to a country that is not under sanctions. Then, it can dock in a European Union port. This is known as a ship-to-ship transfer. Love him or hate him, this fact cannot be ignored that Mr. Putin knows a thing or two about psychological warfare. Even if it requires paying a premium to find suitable workarounds and exploiting human tendencies, he will definitely try to find a way. There is no dearth of corrupt and complacent governments and businesses in today's times. It won't be wrong to say that a severe economic crisis is looming over Europe. We are living in a connected world. And because of that, the ripple effects will be felt outside Europe as well. Europe is already reeling under record high inflation levels. Central banks will raise interest rates to fight inflation. What has begun in the European energy markets could be a trailer for a global economic crisis. The mathematics of conflicts tell us that in times of war, people are lesser than profit. Hegemony is greater than humanity, and media equals money. With rising temperatures and tensions, let us wish that cooler heads prevail in the region. The sooner the war ends, the better for everyone. That is all for this session. Thank you for your time.